Hello, everybody. We are so excited to bring you a new mini-series called The Leadership Lab. This is a podcast dedicated to helping pharmacists develop leadership skills and lead their teams with confidence from the boardroom to the break room. My name is Dena Phillips, and I'll be your host throughout this series. A little background on me. I'm a clinical pharmacist in ambulatory care, and I've been in pharmacy leadership for about 13 years now. To help me launch this series, I am thrilled to be joined by my friend and mentor, Dr. Marc Reynolds, who goes by Dr. Marc. Dr. Marc is the founder and president of Dr. Marc Consulting, a firm that specializes in executive coaching, leadership development, team dynamics, and organizational health for businesses and healthcare organizations of all shapes and sizes. Dr. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. So you and I actually met and started working together several years ago when I was looking for a new voice teacher to improve my singing technique, of all things. And I started taking voice lessons with you through your online performing arts studio. And that's maybe a little weird, given that we're now on a pharmacy leadership podcast. But yeah, so that's kind of how we met. Before you did a career pivot into executive coaching and leadership development, you used to be an opera singer and opera director and have directed operas all over the world, right? Can you tell us a bit about your background?
Yes, it's true. While I've always had a foot in both worlds, my primary focus for many years was as an opera director, voice teacher, and university professor. I've directed productions with opera companies around the world while simultaneously developing my coaching practice. So my journey began as a performer, but I discovered my true passion was directing, helping singers find their authentic voice and bringing all the elements of production together to create something powerful and moving. Over time, I've shifted my focus more towards executive coaching and leadership development. And I've done that through the lens of the artistic principles that still deeply inform my approach. My background in opera gives me a unique lens to see organizational challenges. I've learned that business, like art, works best when we harmonize human elements with technical excellence.
Well, I, obviously loving the performing arts, am super excited about digging into the minutia of all of this. But I guess, first of all, what inspired the move from opera singer and director to executive coaching and leadership development? There had to be some kind of moment in there where you were like, yes, this.
You know, it wasn't really a linear path. It was more, I had these organizations that kind of landed in my lap. Interesting, it's really similar to how we got to working together with voice stuff, and then it just kind of has evolved, and we've touched a lot of different areas over the years. That's happened with a lot of my executive coaching and consulting stuff, is they came to me for something, and then they're like, hey, I think you might actually be able to help me with this. Can we do this? And it just kind of evolved into this thing. So for the majority of the time, I just kind of had these organizations and executives essentially land in my lap, and they kept coming back over and over because it worked. And the aha moment came when I realized both environments face the same fundamental challenges, aligning diverse people toward a common vision. And what truly inspired me was I had an executive who's worked with some really large name companies. And she said, you know, Marc, you keep qualifying this with that you're not necessarily trained in this. You don't have a doctoral degree in business or whatever that happens to be. She's like, but I've worked with a lot of different coaches. I've worked with a lot of different consultants that come in, and you're better than all of them so far. And so just essentially shut up and get down to work, and let's do this thing, because there's a lot for us to do. And that really was a moment where I thought, all these skills I've been honing in opera really do directly apply across to business. So that's kind of what happened.
Nice. Well, I can certainly relate to having a mentor that believes in you. That's always fun. So,
Yeah.
and I know that over the years, we have definitely had our fair share of voice lessons and vocal health training and all that kind of fun stuff. But I have, on multiple occasions, turned our voice lessons into leadership development sessions. I mean, doesn't everyone do that? Sounds normal to me. Thankfully, you're always happy to shift gears whenever I shout squirrel. Um, but I'm very curious, though, how did you recognize that your experience in the performing arts would translate so well and just kind of connect the dots from like, nope, this is actually working. This is exactly what's happening in both arenas.
The simple answer is they brought their problems and it just clicked. I just did what I always do when I'm working with teams, and it worked even better in business than it did with opera, and it evolved that way. But I think some of the key things that are really fascinating is that both opera and business rely on the same foundational elements, right? Clarity of vision, alignment of diverse stakeholders, and effective communication. I mean, if you picture opera, it has to happen under a tight time crunch. There's very large personalities that come from a wide different range of different backgrounds, languages, parts of the world. And you have technicians and designers and wealthy donors that you have to make happy, and the producer. And there is no real, at least from my seat, way to postpone it or push timelines back. So it's kind of a do or die, right? Which, when we go into business, has forced me to really hone some skills that work excellent in business. Business actually feels like a breath of fresh air, and it's easier. There's actually more room, though I'm sure some business people would argue with that. So these skills apply really well. And one of the things that opera taught me was how to create psychological safety for artists. They're taking really vulnerable risks, and it, especially in opera, has to be perceived, at least from the audience, as perfect or near perfect, right? So they have to perform at a high level of excellence. And essentially, that's exactly what high-performing business teams need. The skills of reading a room, adjusting communication style for different personalities, and bringing diverse talents into harmony are universal issues. So both worlds require understanding human dynamics at a deep level, their fears, motivations, communication styles that all drive performance, and sinking that down into really practical tools that they can use now to not just change the mechanical workings of a business, but really change each human in a way that is empowering to them. So
nice. Well, I want to visit more about psychological safety. I'll touch on that again in just a little bit. But one thing I did want to bring up now is I remember when we first started working together, and again, this was in relation to my singing, trying to make progress there. But you recommended a book to me entitled Talent is Overrated: What Really Separates World-Class Performers from Everybody Else, by a guy named Jeff Colvin. And I used it back then as encouragement when I was singing. But could you give us a quick summary of the idea behind this book and how the same concept might apply to leadership?
sure. To qualify this, for any of you who decide to read this, this book made me angry when I first read it, and it really upset me, got really kind of turned some assumptions that we develop over a lifetime about skills and abilities on its head. And it's based in science of deliberate practice and learning. So why I recommend this to people is this book shatters the myth that great leaders are born, not made. We like to think that, right? You're talking about you became a leader, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I, as we've done many times, would probably stop you in that moment and be like, no, stop. Yes, you do. You know a lot more than you think you do. You've been practicing it all along the way. You just didn't realize you were practicing a lot of these tools. And is more about building confidence in your ability to do that. And yes, there are always new tools to learn and gain along the way, right? So Colvin's research confirms what I've seen repeatedly, and that is deliberate practice, not innate talent, is the true differentiator of excellence. And that drove me crazy initially because I had so much like personal identity, and I was born with this talent and this gift, and right. And really what the real talent and gift was, if it was the interest to stick with it and keep learning. This is particularly encouraging for professionals like pharmacists who have already demonstrated the discipline to master a complex field. What's most encouraging is the neuroplasticity research showing our brains can form new leadership habits at any age. So the key is structured practice with feedback, which is exactly the approach I use in the growth alignment model that I use with coaching executives and businesses, but same thing in a voice lesson or otherwise. And I've developed it both for my coaching and consulting work, right? So if you can think structured practice with feedback from someone who is informed and able to give you not just feedback, but clear practical steps of what to do next, right? To enhance your structured practice.
Gotcha. So what I hear you saying is no excuses, right? Is that what we're getting?
There's
no excuse for being a bad leader. You can learn it. Like, oh, I wanted to press the easy button and just be like, I wasn't born with it. So therefore.
Yeah. I guess I would say there are excuses to making mistakes and to not being perfect right now, but there's no excuse to not get better at it, right?
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of shift gears for just a minute because we hear a lot. I know I hear a lot when I'm reading and researching and things about leadership, about the importance of having your own leadership style and philosophy and how fundamental they are to good leadership. But I will fully admit I have no idea how to find that. Like, how does one even go about finding their own leadership style? Can I take a Hogwarts house quiz? If I like 80s music, then I'm this kind of leader. How does one do that?
I love this question because I work with so many leaders that are consumed with what's the right thing to do or what should I do, which leads to an inevitable imposter syndrome issue. It leads to inevitable dissatisfaction with their work. It feels like they're fake or it's false. It doesn't quite ever work right for them. So I guess I would say finding your leadership style begins with self-awareness and understanding your natural tendencies, values, and communication preferences. And that sounds like, oh, nice, self-awareness, great. But it really is crucial. And one of the challenges is it's not just going and internally thinking, it's being challenged. So a place to start might be by identifying what you value most. For example, is it innovation or precision? Do you really light up in life with collaborating with other people, or when things are super efficient, that just like makes your day? These values become your leadership foundation. So if you want to figure that out, just start writing a list of things that really light you up as a person. And if you're like me, it often comes back to food. And so it'd be like, oh, chocolate cake. In which case it'd be like, well, why chocolate cake? And then I'd start working back. And that's a ridiculous exercise that I'm saying. But for you, whatever it is that lights you up, really try to get down to the core of it and start seeing the patterns there. And you'll find what it is that really excites you and motivates you. And that's probably the place to start. The next step is self-assessment. So what are your natural strengths? Where do you need complementary team members, right? There are things where you're like, I could learn that, but that will never be something that I'm going to think about first or care about or really engage in. It's just that's not me. So being able to balance that out. So I recommend using multiple frameworks. So MBTI, Enneagram, and a host of other frameworks that people have used for a while and some new ones. And I use them not to label yourself, but to increase awareness of how you operate. I've avoided these personality tests for years because I was like, I do not fit in a box. I'm sorry. I'm a human. I'm messier than that, and I'm proud of that. But I realized that the ones that I gravitate to and actually have found useful aren't about putting you in a box. It's about identifying your tendencies and patterns of where you, as a human, like to go, what motivates you. So it's really useful when we're talking about this. And I created an assessment that's free to your listeners to do this if they're interested. We'll put it in a link down below in the description if anyone wants to take it. My advice would be this: seek feedback from diverse sources. Your leadership style exists in the perception of others, not just in your own intentions. And I say this a lot when I'm working with people because it really is the crux of a lot of what we're doing is we judge ourselves by our intentions and others judge us by our behaviors. And it's where those don't meet where we come up with tension. So this external feedback becomes really important because we're going to see where our intentions and our behaviors don't line up. Right. And our style really is a mix of those two things. So you might study leaders that you admire or really resonate with, not to imitate them, but to identify the principles of their success. Go meet with them. Ask them to be your mentor. A lot of times these leaders love to mentor people. They love to share what they've learned, these hard-learned lessons, right? You can develop a personal leadership philosophy statement, which sounds ridiculous, but in like, oh, this is way too formal, but is actually really helpful. For me, it took me a long time to hone it down, and I came to where mine is, and I think about it all the time when I wake up because it motivates me. It keeps me centered on what I care about rather than getting pulled into these, what should I do? What could I do? What's the right thing to do, right? And then remember that your leadership style should evolve as you grow and as the context change. It's not this like, this is my style. It's in this box and I've completed, right? It's, we need to, as I would tell my performers frequently, make a decision, but write it in pencil. Always be open to amendment, right? And final thing is, most importantly, your leadership style must be authentically you. When alignment between your values and behaviors exist, then you'll lead with natural confidence and credibility. If they don't, you're always going to be second guessing yourself and not trusting your decisions and not learning from your decisions because you're always looking for that approval from others. And so when someone is angry and mad at you or whatever, you're like, maybe I did something wrong. I'm not a good leader. And rather than be like, no, this is what is important. I'm sorry this upsets you, but, right? There's a confidence that comes with that. So,
gotcha. So I can't really just get away with saying my leadership style is introvert, like, and that'd be kind of where we'll just leave that there. That's my leadership style, and no, but kind of back to the no excuses thing. There's good tools out there. It sounds like to keep us learning about ourselves so that we can lead our teams a little bit better. You had mentioned in your answer, just right there towards the end there, this concept of authenticity and leadership. And I just wanted to kind of explore that a little bit more. What does it actually mean to be an authentic leader?
Oh, that's a good question. Authentic leadership isn't about sharing everything. It's not about being unfiltered. We hear leaders say, I'm just saying it how it is. I'm shooting straight. When really they're just being a punk, right? And they're being rude and discourteous.
Did you follow me around at work?
That said, those are important, but it's what it really comes down to is it's about alignment between your inner values and your external actions, like we were talking about before. Intentions and behaviors.
So I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? That was golden.
Yeah. So authentic leadership is about alignment between your inner values and external actions. Or another way to say it, it's alignment between your intentions and what you really care about and your behaviors. Right. At its core, authentic leadership means having the courage to be seen. And that's where a lot of leaders fail, because that is terrifying, especially when you're up on this pedestal.
Yes.
What if they do see me and they see all my weaknesses, my problems? Allowing your unique perspective and approach to be visible can be terrifying. Now, we'll put on a strong face and pretend that we're not scared, but that's a pretty core human fear, right? Is being seen for everything we are and then being rejected or criticized or ostracized, right? So it requires knowing yourself first, like we talked about, your values, triggers, strengths, growth areas, before you could lead authentically, but also coming to be able to accept those, be okay with that, and realize sharing those with your team and your people, being imperfect, making mistakes, owning those mistakes is really a much stronger leadership model than being perfect. Right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So let me give you some before we jump on, because I love giving really practical, like, do this stuff.
Yes,
right?
Please. We love practical.
Let me give you a few tangible. Yeah. Let me give you some tangible practices for authentic leadership. Number one, regular reflection. Now, that seems obvious, but how many leaders, including myself, this is something I've been working on for a while, actually schedule time to assess when you felt most or least authentic in your leadership that week? I mean, how often you're like, man, I was just totally putting on a mask and I felt like garbage, and that felt like a big fat lie. That felt awful. No, we're just like, ugh. And then we forget about it and move on. We don't actually take the moment to learn. 2 would be values clarification, identifying your top 5 non-negotiable values and evaluate decisions against them. Right? If you take those top 5 and evaluate, how does it match up? And we're like, well, it doesn't matter because my organization already has these things in place that I gotta, these protocols and these rules and these we all have this contract and I got to do this. Well, you can line up your non-negotiables within those. You can, but you need to then be able to lead in that way against your non-negotiables. 3rd, vulnerable communication. Don't just share your decisions, but share your thinking process behind them. Doesn't mean all the time. Not everyone needs to know everything. But when you can tell this is going to be important, or this is causing some instability or people to feel nervous or anxious or upset, as soon as you start sharing how you got there, most people will be like, oh, okay, got it. 4th, continuous feedback loops, creating safe channels for honest input and about how your leadership is experienced. That's its own challenging bucket there that I spend a lot of time on with leadership teams and groups. Congruence checks. Regularly ask yourself, does how I'm leading align with who I truly am? Or am I hiding something?
Right.
And then finally, and then I'll be quiet so we can move on, is boundaries. Setting clear boundaries about what you will and won't do creates space for authenticity. And I don't mean here by boundaries, you're telling what other people, what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. That's not a boundary, right? That's an ultimatum, or that's bossing people around and being a punk. What it is saying, if you do this, I will do this. They know exactly what to expect from you. That gives you so much permission because they know ahead of time. This is no surprise. I've already told you what I'm going to do. You've already decided, so you don't have to, in the moment of anger or frustration, make a decision, which is a terrible time to make the decision, right? And so these create an environment that you can be authentic, others can be authentic, and it becomes a really kind of beautiful environment for everyone. So.
Yes. I like the concept of boundaries. One of the best things I learned in marriage counseling was what a boundary is and what it isn't. And I really have learned that lesson well. And I really kind of liked the way that my counselor put it. when he was just like, boundaries are about you. They have nothing to do with anyone else. They're all about you. And when you try to boundary somebody else, if I can use that word as a verb for a minute, it's no longer about safety and, trying to create this stable environment for you to be heard and seen. It's basically telling my husband, okay, I feel like you're an idiot when you take, it kind of became more about him, in that moment.
Yep.
And so I've enjoyed learning about boundaries as well. Speaking of the absolute fear of like authenticity and putting yourself out there and trying to do all of those things, I really hate to even mention these next three words because they haunt us and we don't deserve it.
I'm so intrigued. What is this?
Yeah, we're innocent. We're unsuspecting. We're well-intentioned and we just don't deserve it. But employee engagement surveys, they strike fear in the best of us. And they literally just have us yelling, what have I done to deserve this at random people in the grocery store? And it just ends up going off the rails from there. So,
sure.
And I'll be honest, in my own experience, I've had years where we get these employee engagement surveys back and my team thinks I am amazing. And I have just done so great and all of these wonderful things. And then there are other years where it's pretty much the same core group of employees, save for one or two. And I get the exact opposite to the point where like it's really tough to kind of sit in there and really read and focus on what it is they had to say about what they thought about the job I was doing. So that's just always interesting. But, despite it being like sometimes the worst part of our leadership process, and despite the difficulties, what is the value of this type of feedback and why should we put ourselves through it?
I'm going to be a bit rogue here for a second. Because this is a common thing right now. And these 360-degree feedbacks, things that will be done, skip level interviews. There's a host of ways that we assess up and down the chain of command, not even just engagement things that are cause all kinds of havoc, right? And so let me share the rogue element that's going to maybe get some people a little cranky. And that is, these feedback things are not ever going to be accurate when they're done internally. They're never going to reflect the real picture. Your employees are as terrified of these as you are most of the time.
That makes sense.
And so they're being really careful about, do I put this in? Do I don't? Yes, I really feel this angry about it. I'll put this one in. I shouldn't have said that. And then they're terrified of what's going to happen afterwards, right? And yes, it's anonymous. No one knows. Of course you know. And right, and up and down the chain of command, these things are problematic. So am I trying to say don't do these kind of feedbacks? Absolutely not. They are important. They will give you some interesting data. But more importantly, they create a opportunity to connect. It gives an opportunity to show your team that I will listen to what you have to say in your feedback, and I will make changes based on that. I'll hear you. And that will help them feel comfortable. Comfortable is not even the right word. They'll feel trust in you, that they can tell you things and that you do take it seriously, that you do care. So rather than thinking of these as like, these are comprehensive evaluation of who I am as a person, just let go of it. For those purposes, they are terrible. And when people come to review your job in particular, they shouldn't be used to evaluate your job and whether you're doing a good job or not, frankly. If they want to do that, they should bring in a third-party person to come in and interview your team and really do it anonymously, and then give that leader that feedback. That would be the most accurate way they could possibly get the real story, right? And then they'll know, no, this person's just angry that they didn't get a raise. or they're angry because you hurt their feelings in this one conversation or in this one meeting, and so they're trying to take it out on you. Sorry. So that's what I would say with these feedback sessions. Rather than taking it personally, think, how do I use this to connect to my employee? This is an opportunity to connect with my team, right? And help them feel seen, heard, and valued.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of tying your entire self-worth up into what percentile was I compared to my leader, my colleague next door with his department. Like,
I think the other key thing is realizing that the goal isn't perfection. It's showing that you continue to develop and improve and grow as a leader. That means not yourself. Wait, what? No, if we look at it, your career trajectory once you become a leader isn't necessarily about your individual performance. It's about your team and how well aligned they are.
That's very well said. Yes. Yes, because I've rarely had a team feel like we were all on the same page about the mission and them not feel like there was some cohesiveness going on. Mm-hmm. And the opposite has been true when it seems like no one has any idea what we're driving toward. There's a lot more toxicity and chit-chatty cattiness going on behind the scenes. And so that's a very great point. I do want to revisit this concept of psychological safety. And I know that it sounds very buzzwordy to me. Like I can come up with a few things in my brain about maybe what it means and that kind of thing. But then it takes an even weirder turn when we're trying to apply that to the workplace. I can think of psychological safety in marriage counseling or in my relationships with my family and friends and that kind of thing. But it takes on a special kind of thing, and that there's it's a little bit nuanced. You're not, the goal is not to be like super authentically open with all your emotions and, problems and weaknesses and everything with your teams. Right. So can you describe a little bit more about that and how it applies in the workplace?
Sure. And let me preface this by, this sounds like a very touchy-feely, soft, squishy subject, right? That feels like a dangerous area, right?
It does.
Oh, let's all be nice. And it sounds like sunshine and unicorns and rainbows,
Kumbaya,
right?
Yeah. Some ice cream.
So I want to preface this by, my dad's actually a surgeon. My two oldest brothers are doctors. I grew up reading medical journals. And I was planning on being a doctor like my dad growing up. And so I actually did a lot of education in that realm before I decided to go rogue and go into music, right? And so I love data. I love really great studies. And for those that are practical leaders who are like, I don't really care if everyone feels great or not, I just want good results. Well, even for that leader, psychological safety is huge for productivity and for getting the results you want. There's no way around it. If you don't do this, it's never going to get there. It can't. It can't get there. So let me, with that preface, let me kind of run down what it looks like when we're talking about psychological safety. And say psychological safety is essentially the shared belief that team members can speak up, take risks, and be their authentic selves without fear of negative consequences.
Okay.
It's the foundation that allows everything else in the organization to function effectively. You're like, wait, no negative consequences? And the answer is, for mistake number one, for error number one, for issue number one. Then part of psychological safety is knowing there will be feedback that is delivered in a professional, kind, nurturing way that gives them the opportunity to change. Now, if they don't change, then we got a different problem that we got to work through. But psychological safety is realizing that an organization gets stronger by it being safe to make mistakes, because that's how people are going to learn and grow. There's no other way. So in practical terms, it looks like a pharmacist being comfortable saying, I made a mistake without fearing punishment. Now, again, if they made the same mistake for 6 times in a row over the course of 2 weeks, then we got to figure something out. It's a technician suggesting a workflow improvement even if it challenges how things have always been done. Being like, hey, that's interesting.
Favorite phrase. It's how we always do.
Oh, it's the death of any organization, especially in today's world where things are changing so fast, right? So it's being able to hear someone and give it space to actually think about it, right? Even if it sounds bonkers at start, you give it space. It's team members asking questions when they don't understand something, rather than pretending and not making eye contact and just saying, because they want to avoid looking incompetent, because they're worried that if they do, they're going to get fired. Right. And what's particularly interesting is that psychological safety isn't about being nice or about lowering standards. It's quite the opposite. The safest teams actually have higher performance standards because issues are addressed, and they're addressed early before they become catastrophic. They innovate more because ideas aren't filtered by fear. And they learn faster because failures and successes are equally discussed. So
I like that.
The science and research says all these objections that people give about psychological safety be squishy that's not it at all. That's different. That comes down to accountability. It comes down to permissiveness. It comes down to pretending to be nice. Those are toxic. Those are terrible. That's not what we're talking about. So the key behaviors that create psychological safety are really simple. Demonstrating curiosity rather than judgment when someone speaks up. Sound familiar? We talk about that a lot in the arts, right? And in other places is putting the judgment part of our brain aside and just being curious. Acknowledging your own mistakes openly as a leader so that your other people that you are leading, your direct reports, feel like they can too. And responding productively when team members take risks, even when they don't work out. Obviously, when we're saying risks, healthy risks. If like all of a sudden they're coming to work on drugs, that's not a good risk, right? So these behaviors signal to everyone that it's safe to be a human at work, which we've spent a lot of time, especially in the US, pretending that we're not.
Yeah.
Being professional is, become a machine. That is being professional. No, I'm sorry, it's not. And I think there's a lot of that in the workforce that I'm passionate about getting rid of.
Right.
Then in my experience, leaders who deliberately build psychological safety find that nearly every other aspect of leadership becomes easier. Communication flows more honestly, change initiatives meet less resistance, and performance issues can be addressed more directly. It's the foundation of organizational alignment, which is the piece of the pie that AI can never touch. It's this messy human bit that we as leaders, if we want to stay relevant and make a difference, it's not about a new piece of technology. It's about learning this stuff, how to deal with the messy human side.
Yeah, I had a leader tell me one time when we were going through a rough patch of trying to figure out how to stop particular issues and instances from getting out of the pharmacy to the floors and that kind of thing, was just that if you don't tell me, we can't fix it. And because there is a lot of fear, especially with pharmacists, where even recently a nurse was held criminally liable for some mistakes that were made in the routine duties of her job. And so there's a lot at stake. There's a lot on the line. It takes a lot to come up and say, this is not working. I don't feel safe, doing this practice. Yeah, I find that really, really interesting. And, psychological safety, I think we're still a little afraid of it. If I'm being honest, I know I'm still a little afraid of it, even as I report to my own leadership. It's still like, okay, like, I guess we got to do it. We can't, no way around it. But, so I think, spending some time there with your own teams and your own self-reflection, trying to figure out, okay, what does this look like? And how do I want to approach my team with it? Is really useful for us. So I have one more question that I would like to ask you.
Sure.
what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership? What do you think is the most important to kind of get yourself make the leap and start taking the plunge into organizing your own improvement plan, so to speak, for your leadership style? But, there's these concepts of your mission, your vision, and your values. And so, kind of like, how do we say, okay, here's where I'm going to start. This is my day one plan. What in your opinion, would you think would be the best way to go about that?
Oof. Where my mind goes first is, and it kind of fits in all three of those buckets that you mentioned, but it's trust.
Okay.
If we don't have trust, none of these things that we're talking about works. It won't happen.
Okay.
And we like to think that trust is a limited commodity. And when it's lost or gone, you're never getting it back. That's not the truth, actually. We can. And people are inspired and they love to see change and progress. So that's my bit of hope first, is trust is something we have to build. We got to earn it. It takes time. And we can turn it around if it's going the wrong direction at any point. Number two with trust, and if you're saying where to start, do what you say you're going to do.
I like that.
Do what you say you're going to do. If you will do that, trust, the key fundamental piece of trust, will start working. It'll start turning around. And you'll start learning what you need to change so you can be trusted. Because you're like, well, I said I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Wow, that was really dumb.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I learned from it. But if you'll be authentic in yourself and trust, then you can learn. If you don't, it'll be this kind of cycle of why doesn't it ever work? We never quite learn. We're just stuck in dysfunction. But if we can get those pieces in place, it will start improving.
Gotcha. That is excellent advice. Dr. Marc, thank you so much for joining me today. As it always is, it was an incredible pleasure speaking with you. If our listeners want to learn more about you or your firm or the services that you offer and how you might be of benefit to us to launch our careers or help us manage our teams better and all of those kinds of things, where can they go?
Sure. We do offer a lot of different services, as we've been talking about. One of it is actually a career acceleration program, just out of interest. I don't think we've ever talked about that. But where you can go is down below. I'll share a link. That's the link to the assessment that we talked about. That's free. There's no ongoing commitment beyond that. You'll just get an immediate response there. You also include a link to our website where you can learn more about us and what's going on. I'll also include a link where you can just schedule a complimentary call with me. And for your listeners, there's no ongoing obligation. It's just a chance for us to chat, and I'll help you figure out what the next steps are. And there we go. And also include my email. That way, if you want to reach it out in any of those ways, I'd be happy to chat with you and talk with you. And yeah. Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk. This has been really fun. Really fun.
Well, I'm so thrilled that you decided to join me today. And guys, I've been working with Dr. Marc for, almost 5 years now in some capacity or another, and I cannot recommend him enough. So if you have any interest in any of these types of things, I would highly recommend that you reach out because he's been amazing. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I'm Dena Phillips, your host. And in keeping with our theme for this episode, that's a wrap. We will see you next time on the Leadership Lab.